My name is Dr. Nasser Khalid Al-Farouqi, and I am 70 years old. For more than 4 decades, I served quietly behind the walls of Saudi palaces as a physician to members of the royal family. I witnessed births, emergencies, private tragedies, and secrets the world will never hear. But nothing, not the pressure of my work, not the weight of my responsibility, not even the reverence I had for Islam, prepared me for the moment my own body betrayed me. 2 years ago I was a dying man. My spine burned day and night. My hands trembled uncontrollably. My muscles weakened until I could barely stand. I flew to specialists in India, China, Europe, and South Korea, yet every test came back normal. I sought ruqyah from respected imams in Riyadh, Jeddah, and Medina, yet nothing changed. I watched myself fade, terrified that I, a doctor trusted by princes, could not save my own life. Then, at the lowest point of my existence, a foreign nurse whispered forbidden words that shook me to the core. "Sir, Jesus can heal you." I was furious. I reported her. I silenced her. But the truth I tried to bury refused to leave me. Until one night, in a hospital room in Riyadh, after a dream that split my soul open, I whispered a name I had spent a lifetime avoiding. And everything changed. This is the story of how a royal doctor, a devout Muslim for 70 years, found himself standing in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, confessing Jesus as Lord, after he healed every disease in my body. For more than 4 decades, I served as a physician to several members of the Saudi royal family, a position that shaped my entire adult life. I was born in Al-Malaz, Riyadh, into a family of teachers and civil servants, ordinary people who taught me discipline, respect, and a deep sense of honor. I was the first in my family to study medicine, completing my training at King Saud University before receiving fellowships in London and Munich, experiences that widened my understanding of science and sharpened my belief that human knowledge, if applied correctly, could solve almost anything. By the time I returned to the kingdom, my reputation grew quickly, and doors I never imagined opened before me. I was eventually assigned to the medical team responsible for treating members of the royal household, a responsibility that demanded absolute confidentiality and total loyalty. Over the years, I witnessed births, emergencies, late-night crises, and quiet moments of vulnerability among the royals, moments very few outsiders ever see. Through it all, I carried myself with the dignity expected of someone who represented not only the medical field but also the unspoken trust of the kingdom. My work required me to travel between palaces in Riyadh, Jeddah, and Al Diriyah, often on short notice. Some days I treated minor illnesses, while other days demanded urgent decisions that could alter the course of a family's future. I worked alongside brilliant surgeons and specialists, many of whom became lifelong colleagues. Yet in all these years, I never imagined I would one day become the patient instead of the doctor. As Muslims, we often tell ourselves that Allah gives strength to endure anything, and for most of my life, that felt true. I prayed regularly, visited the mosque, fasted during Ramadan, and tried to live with humility even among people of high status. My identity as a Muslim and my role as a physician blended into one foundation: service. But beneath the stability was a quiet fear I ignored for too long, the fear that if illness ever struck me severely, my entire world would collapse. The first sign of sickness appeared one morning as I prepared to attend a consultation at King Faisal Specialist Hospital. I was standing in my living room, buttoning my thobe, when my left hand suddenly went numb. It felt as though the muscles had forgotten how to respond, and within seconds, the sensation spread into my arm. I stood perfectly still, waiting for it to pass. When it did, I told myself it was stress or lack of sleep. But inside my chest, a cold uneasiness settled. Later that day, while speaking with a cardiologist about a royal patient, I felt a stabbing pain shoot through my spine. It was sharp, hot, and so unexpected that my breath caught in my throat. I excused myself and sat down in a private waiting area, trying to hide the trembling in my fingers. For someone who was known for his calmness in emergencies, I felt humiliated by how quickly fear overtook me. That night, I performed wudu and prayed Isha slowly, asking Allah for reassurance. Yet even during sujud, the burning sensation in my back pulsed angrily, as if reminding me that something inside me had shifted. Within weeks, my symptoms multiplied in ways that defied simple medical explanation. The numbness became more frequent. Sharp headaches began piercing the sides of my skull like electric shock. My muscles weakened. My legs stiffened unexpectedly while walking through the corridors of private clinic. On some mornings, I woke drenched in sweat, choking on air as my chest tightened violently. As a physician, I evaluated myself clinically. Was it a neurological disorder? Early autoimmune disease? Complications from an infection I might have been exposed to? I ran blood tests, imaging scans, and nerve conduction studies, first in private labs, then through trusted colleagues who understood the sensitivity of my position. Yet every test returned normal or inconclusive. The more normal the results appeared, the more frightened I became. Medical science is comforting because it gives shape to the unknown. But when even science cannot explain what you feel in your bones, fear sharpens into something darker, something that steals sleep and eats hope slowly. I began losing weight rapidly. Eating became difficult because nausea gripped me unpredictably. I could no longer perform simple tasks without feeling exhausted. My friends in the medical field urged me to rest, but rest only made me aware of my own weakness. My nights became the hardest part of my day. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my pulse hammer in my ears. The fear of dying was not what tormented me. Rather, it was the fear of living in agony with no answers. I had treated countless patients who cried in my office, begging for relief from diseases that had no cure. Now, for the first time in my life, I understood their desperation on a personal level. I performed ruqyah on myself, reciting verses from the Quran, asking Allah to remove whatever unseen harm might be afflicting me. But even during recitation, the burning in my spine intensified, mocking my efforts, pressing against my faith. My responsibilities began slipping through my fingers. I canceled consultations I had previously never dreamed of missing. I avoided palace visits unless absolutely necessary. During one private medical meeting with a royal family member in Al-Hadda, my hand shook so violently while writing notes that I had to grip the pen tightly to steady it. The prince noticed and asked softly, "Are you well, doctor?" I lied without hesitation, offering a polite smile and attributing it to fatigue. The truth was far more unsettling. I did not know how long I could continue hiding the state of my body. Colleagues began expressing concern discreetly, and though they tried to mask it with professionalism, I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew something was wrong, very wrong, yet none of them had an answer. The emotional weight of my illness intensified when my two daughters visited me unexpectedly one evening. They noticed the hollowness in my cheeks, the trembling in my hands, the effort it took me to stand. Their eyes filled with fear, and seeing their expressions made my heart crack. I had always been a strong father, someone they looked up to and admired. Now I felt like a shadow of myself, fading slowly. "Baba, you need rest," they insisted. "Let others handle your work. You must take care of yourself." I nodded, but inside, I felt the same sinking truth. I was losing control. Doctors are trained to fight for their patients' lives. But what happens when the doctor must fight for his own, and doesn't know where to begin? In my desperation, I reached out to trusted physicians abroad. I flew to London, where I once trained, seeking help from specialists I had admired for decades. They conducted tests with European precision, analyzing my neurological patterns and scanning for abnormalities deep within the brain and spine. Yet again, nothing conclusive emerged. One neurologist from Germany, after reviewing my chart, leaned back and said gently, "Your symptoms do not follow a recognizable pattern. This may be extremely rare or something we don't understand yet." His honesty terrified me. Doctors are supposed to give patients answers, not confessions of uncertainty. When I returned to my hotel room near Hyde Park, I sat alone for an hour, staring at my shaking hands, realizing I was walking a path no medical training had prepared me for. When I returned to Riyadh, the physical and emotional exhaustion weighed heavily on me. Each step across my living room felt like wading through thick mud. My breath grew shallow. The burning pain in my back spread into my chest. It became harder to think clearly, harder to trust my own strength. During one evening prayer, while seated on my prayer rug facing the Qibla, I felt so faint that I feared I would collapse mid-salah. I whispered softly, "Ya Allah, please show me what to do," but even as I prayed, a dreadful thought crept in. What if my journey for healing was just beginning? What if the answers I sought could not be found in the world of medicine I had built my life upon? The palace medical office eventually insisted I take temporary leave, a polite way of saying I could no longer fulfill my duties in my condition. I agreed reluctantly, even though stepping back felt like a personal defeat. Around this time, a decision was made, without consulting me, to assign a private caregiver who could assist me around the clock. I did not protest. My body was too weak, and my pride too damaged to resist. A nurse was selected through the palace network, someone known for her skill and discretion. Her name was Maria Santos, a Filipina nurse who had worked with high-profile patients for years. I had no idea then that her arrival in my home would mark the beginning of a chapter that would change my life forever. At that moment, all I knew was that my strength was fading, my answers had run dry, and the disease, whatever it was, had no intention of letting me go. When my symptoms intensified beyond what I could manage, I knew I had no choice but to seek help outside the kingdom. It was a strange feeling, leaving Riyadh not as the confident royal physician who accompanied princes and dignitaries abroad, but as a frightened, aging man whose own body was failing him. The palace arranged the trip discreetly, ensuring that no unnecessary attention fell on my condition. My first destination was New Delhi, where several highly regarded neurologists practiced at a private hospital near Connaught Place. I had referred many Saudi patients to this facility over the years. Never did I imagine I would one day be one of them. The moment I arrived, the doctors began a series of tests. MRIs, blood work, nerve studies, everything available in modern diagnostic medicine. They monitored me for days, watching my hands tremble, my legs stiffen, and my breath tighten unpredictably. When the results finally came, the lead neurologist looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and confusion. "Dr. Nasser," he said gently, "your symptoms are real, but the scans do not correlate with the severity of your condition. There is something happening that we cannot identify." His honesty struck me like a blow to the chest. If experts I trusted could not explain what was happening, then where did that leave me? Since Western medicine failed to give me answers, I turned to ancient medicine, hoping wisdom from older traditions might reveal what machines could not. From New Delhi, I traveled south to Kerala, known for its Ayurvedic healing centers. The facility I visited sat among palm trees and quiet rivers, a peaceful place where patients sought balance between body and spirit. The practitioners were respectful and attentive, applying oils and herbal compresses to my spine, attempting to calm the burning sensation that tormented me day and night. They guided me through breathing exercises and prescribed traditional herbal mixtures meant to reduce inflammation and restore nerve function. For a few hours after treatment, I felt mild relief, as though my body softened slightly. But the pain always returned by nightfall, sharper than before. I lay awake listening to the sound of crickets outside my window, wondering why every attempt to heal me only created more questions. I had traveled thousands of miles only to learn that even cultures with centuries of medicinal wisdom had no explanation for what ravaged my body. My next stop was Shanghai, where I was admitted under a false name to avoid attention. China's hospitals impressed me with their efficiency and quiet discipline. A renowned neurologist, one whose articles I had studied during my training, evaluated me personally. He observed my episodes carefully. The sudden numbness in my arm, the tremors that shook my hands without warning, the burning sensation along my spine that returned with cruel regularity. He combined modern diagnostic tools with traditional Chinese therapies, including acupuncture and moxibustion. The acupuncture needles brought brief moments of release, as though tiny windows of relief opened in my nerves. But the relief vanished quickly, leaving the same relentless pain behind. One evening, as I stood before my hotel window overlooking the Huangpu River, I realized how lonely illness can make a person, even a man who spent his life surrounded by people. I had always believed that knowledge illuminated every dark corner of uncertainty, but this sickness seemed to grow stronger the more knowledge I pursued. From China, I flew to Seoul, a city known for its cutting-edge medical research. The specialists there approached my case with admirable seriousness, running advanced neurological scans that I had never seen before. They tracked electrical signals in my spine, monitored blood flow to my brain, and even performed experimental sensorimotor evaluations. Yet when the results were compiled, the chief neurologist shook his head slowly. "Your condition is complex," he said. "But nothing here explains why you suffer this way." He asked if I had experienced trauma or emotional stress recently, as though the terror in my body could be explained by something as simple as fatigue. I lowered my gaze, unable to express the truth, that I was terrified, humiliated, and deeply confused. As I prepared to leave Seoul, I felt the weight of helplessness settle deeper inside me. Doctors in 3 countries had examined me, yet none could give me a diagnosis. It was as if the disease itself mocked the entire field of medicine. Returning to Europe offered no comfort. In London, I visited a private neurology center not far from Regent Street where I had trained decades earlier. The familiarity of the city, the scent of its cold air, the old stone buildings, it all reminded me of a younger, stronger version of myself. But that version of me no longer existed. The specialists there reviewed every scan, every test, every symptom. One physician suggested an autoimmune disorder, another suspected an atypical neurological disease. But each theory fell apart when compared to the actual test result. They prescribed medications that only worsened the tremors. One night, lying in my hotel room near Marble Arch, staring at the ceiling with tears gathering at the corners of my eyes, I whispered, "Ya Allah, why is this happening to me?" For the first time, I felt my faith tremble, not because I doubted Allah's existence, but because I had no idea what He was trying to show me. When I returned to Riyadh after these exhausting travels, I turned to the spiritual resources available within Islam. I visited respected imams in Riyadh, Jeddah, and Medina, hoping they could identify a spiritual cause behind my suffering. Some recited ruqyah over me, placing their hands gently on my back while reciting verses from Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Baqarah. Their voices were calm, steady, filled with sincerity. As a Muslim, I believed in the importance of ruqyah and the possibility of unseen forces causing harm. Yet during these sessions I felt no reaction at all, not warmth, not relief, not discomfort. Nothing. One imam told me, if it were seer or an evil eye we would see signs. Another said, perhaps this is a test from Allah. You must endure with patience. I nodded respectfully, but inside, I felt like a man drowning who was told simply to breathe deeper. I also sought ruqyah from a well-known scholar in Medina whose reputation extended across the kingdom. His voice filled the room with power as he recited long portions of the Quran, commanding any unseen harm to leave my body. But again, there was no change, no easing of pain, no shift inside me. The scholar looked at me thoughtfully and said, "There is suffering in your body, but it does not respond like spiritual affliction. You may need to look elsewhere for answers." His words unsettled me. Look elsewhere? Where else was there to look? I had exhausted the resources of medicine and the resources of faith, and both pathways led me to the same silent wall. By this point, my physical strength had deteriorated severely. My legs shook when I walked. My arms felt weak when I tried to lift even light objects. My heart pounded unpredictably, and my sleep came only in short, haunted stretches. My daughters cried when they saw me. My colleagues avoided showing their pity, but I could see it clearly in their faces. I withdrew into myself, ashamed of how helpless I had become. Nights were the worst, those quiet hours when a man confronts not only his pain, but his deepest fears. I often sat on my prayer rug whispering, "Ya Allah, guide me. Show me something. Anything." But the silence remained. During one particularly difficult night, as the burning sensation spread through my spine like a wildfire, I realized something terrifying. I had reached the limits of what medicine, science, and Islamic spiritual practices could offer. The path ahead of me was empty, void of answers, void of hope. I was a physician with decades of experience, yet I could not save myself. I was a Muslim who prayed regularly, yet I felt increasingly abandoned. I was a man with connections and resources, yet none of them mattered in the face of this invisible torment. The only thing left for me was to return home and accept the caregiver the palace had assigned. I had no idea then that her presence would alter the course of my life forever. All I knew as the aircraft descended over Riyadh was that I was returning home more broken than I had ever been in my 70 years. When I returned to Riyadh, the palace's medical office finalized the arrangement for a private caregiver. I was too weak and too emotionally exhausted to protest. That was how Maria Santos, a Filipina nurse in her early 40s, walked into my home for the first time. She arrived wearing a modest uniform, her hair tied neatly back, her face calm and professional. I learned that she had worked in several royal residences before mine, always quietly, always respectfully. From the moment she stepped into the room, she observed everything. How slowly I moved, how my fingers twitched involuntarily, how I struggled to sit without wincing. She adjusted pillows, organized medications, and set up a more comfortable sleeping arrangement. She spoke gently, calling me sir or doctor, never overstepping, never intruding. I valued silence in my home, and she seemed to understand that instinctively. Still, I sensed something different about her, something I could not identify then. Over the following days, my condition declined with alarming speed. The tremors in my hands grew sharper, making simple tasks, holding a cup, writing my name, feel like impossible challenges. The burning along my spine intensified, radiating into my chest and shoulders. Sometimes, during a quiet afternoon, my left arm would suddenly go numb, leaving me unable to lift it for several minutes. Maria monitored everything, taking notes with precision, adjusting my meals, checking my blood pressure, and reminding me gently to take medications even though none of them made any difference. She moved around me with an attentiveness I had rarely encountered in my long medical career. But what struck me most was the sadness in her eyes when she watched me struggle. It wasn't pity, it was compassion, the kind that comes from someone who genuinely cares. It was unsettling, almost uncomfortable, because I had spent my life maintaining emotional distance from those I oversaw. At night, she often passed by my room quietly, checking to see if I was awake. Most times I was. Sleeplessness had become a constant companion. She would knock gently and say, "Sir, do you need anything?" I would shake my head, trying to maintain the last fragments of dignity I still possessed. But one night, when the pain struck with unusual cruelty, I could no longer hide my suffering. The burning sensation shot up my spine with such force that I cried out unintentionally. Maria rushed into the room, her face filled with alarm. "Doctor, breathe slowly," she said, placing a hand on my arm. Her voice was steady, almost soothing. She helped me sit upright and brought cold water. As she tended to me, she whispered something under her breath in Tagalog. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a prayer. I felt a strange discomfort hearing it, but grief and pain left me too weary to react. Over the next several days, I noticed her praying quietly when she thought I wasn't watching, before she prepared my injections, before she adjusted my pillows, sometimes even when she stood by the window in the early morning light. At first, I dismissed it as a harmless habit. Many foreign workers in the kingdom kept their faith privately. But one evening, after a particularly painful episode left me trembling and breathless, she stood by my bedside longer than usual. She looked hesitant, as though she was debating whether to speak. Finally, she said softly, "Sir, may I tell you something?" I nodded, expecting medical advice or a suggestion about my diet. Instead, she whispered 12 words that shattered the calmness of the room. "Sir, Jesus can heal you. He healed my father. He can heal you too." For a moment, I could not comprehend what she had said. The room felt silent, suspended. Then, like a match thrown into dry paper, something inside me ignited violently. Anger surged through my body, pushing aside pain, logic, and restraint. "How dare you speak that name in my home?" I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. The words echoed sharply against the walls. "Do you think I need the God of another religion?" My face burned with rage. "I am a Muslim. I worship Allah. Do not ever mention that name to me again." Maria stepped back, her eyes widening with shock, but not fear. What I saw in her eyes was sorrow, not regret. "Sir," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I didn't mean to offend you. I only wanted to help." But her explanation only provoked me further. "Help?" I spat. "If you ever speak of Jesus again, I will have you removed from this household immediately. Do you understand?" She lowered her head slowly. "Yes, sir." But I could tell she wasn't sorry for saying it, only sorry for how much it hurt me to hear it. The moment she left the room, a wave of guilt seeped into me. I had overreacted. I had spoken to her with cruelty. But I pushed the guilt aside, telling myself I was defending my faith. 4 days afterward, silence hung heavily between us. She did her duties with the same care, the same gentleness, but she no longer looked at me directly. And I felt her absence, even when she stood a few feet away. That single sentence about Jesus echoed in my mind relentlessly. Why did it bother me so much? Why did it strike such a raw nerve? I refused to think about it, yet my mind returned to it as if pulled by some unseen force. Weeks passed, and my condition deteriorated beyond anything I imagined possible. My episodes became more violent. My breathing would hitch unexpectedly. My chest tightened without warning. One night, my legs gave out completely. I collapsed onto my bedroom floor, unable to move. The shock of the fall knocked the air from my lungs, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was dying. "Maria!" I gasped. My voice barely carried beyond my throat, but she heard it. She rushed in, horror flashing across her face as she knelt beside me. "Sir, don't move!" she cried, supporting my head and checking my pulse. The fear in her eyes told me everything. This was no longer something she could manage alone. Within minutes, she contacted the palace medical office. A private ambulance arrived and rushed me to King Faisal Specialist Hospital, where a royal suite was prepared for emergency cases. I lay on the stretcher, staring at the ceiling while fluorescent lights passed overhead. In that moment, I felt my life slipping into a place I could no longer control. Doctors surrounded me, attaching monitors, administering medication, speaking in urgent tones. Yet through all the noise, one memory surfaced clearly in my mind, the way Maria had whispered, "Jesus can heal you." I didn't understand why those words resurfaced at such a moment, nor did I want to. All I knew was that I had reached the lowest point of my life, and the path ahead was covered in darkness. The first night I spent in the Royal Medical Suite at King Faisal Specialist Hospital was one of the longest of my life. Machines hummed quietly, monitors blinked in the dim light, and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. Doctors had done everything they could to stabilize me, but even lying completely still, The burning sensation in my spine flared without mercy. When they left the room, the silence felt heavier than the illness itself. I tried to pray, whispering, Ya Allah, Shifa, Shifa, but my mind was too clouded with fear to form complete supplications. I drifted in and out of restless sleep until the early hours of the morning, when I fell into a dream so vivid, so unnerving, that it felt more real than anything in that hospital room. It began with me standing alone in a vast desert valley, the sky stretching endlessly above me, the wind whispering across the sand with eerie gentleness. My legs trembled, my chest felt tight, and every breath seemed to echo inside an empty world. In the dream, I saw a dry riverbed running across the valley floor, cracked and lifeless. I stared at it, unsure why it drew my attention so strongly. Then, suddenly, water began flowing through it, clear, bright, shimmering like nothing I had ever seen in waking life. The stream carved a path toward me, stopping right at my feet. I knelt down, overwhelmed by its beauty, and dipped my hand into the water. It felt warm, soothing, almost alive. As I lifted my gaze, I sensed someone behind me, though I could not see him. A voice, deep yet gentle, powerful yet tender, spoke with a clarity that cut through every barrier inside me. Come to me, you have tried everyone else. The words echoed like thunder across the desert, yet they settled over my heart like soft rain. I tried to turn toward the voice, but my body felt heavy, rooted to the ground. When I finally managed to stand, my strength failed, and I collapsed into the stream. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, gripping the bedsheet as if the dream were still happening around me. My heart pounded violently, my hands trembled uncontrollably. For several minutes I could not speak. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what I had just experienced. It was not like any dream I had ever had. It felt purposeful, intentional, almost like a message. I pressed my palms against my eyes, whispering, "Why me? Why now?" My entire body shook as if something inside me had broken open. I thought of Allah and the prayers I had repeated night after night. I thought of the imams who had recited ruqyah over me. And then, unexpectedly, I thought of Maria, the foreign nurse whose words I had rejected angrily, the woman whose whispered mention of Jesus had stirred a storm inside me. The memory struck me with such force that tears slid down my face. Shame flooded me. Fear followed. But beneath both emotions, something else flickered, a longing I did not know how to name. The morning sunlight filtered through the hospital curtains when I finally pressed the call button. A nurse entered, but I asked specifically for Maria. She arrived a few minutes later, standing near the door with cautious eyes, unsure whether I had summoned her out of anger or need. The sight of her triggered a wave of guilt. "Come in," I said quietly. She stepped closer. For several seconds I struggled to speak, my throat tightening every time I tried to form words. Eventually, I whispered, "I am sorry for shouting at you." Her expression softened instantly, as though the weight she had been carrying finally loosened. "Sir, it's all right," she said gently. "You were in pain. But we both knew the truth. I had not reacted out of pain but out of fear." "No," I said, shaking my head weakly. "I was wrong. I should not have spoken to you like that." Tears gathered in my eyes before I could stop them. Maria stepped closer, placing a respectful distance between us yet letting her compassion be clear. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. "You don't have to explain. I understand." After a long silence, I said the words I never imagined would leave my mouth. "Maria, what made you say that Jesus could heal me?" She blinked, surprised that I was asking sincerely this time. Taking a slow breath, she pulled a chair beside my bed and sat down. "Sir," she began, "I have seen many patients. I have cared for people in terrible pain. But your suffering, it felt different. It felt heavier. My father was once very sick. Doctors said he would not recover. But when we prayed to Jesus, he healed him completely." Her voice trembled with emotion as she continued, "I do not say his name lightly, sir. And I know this country is not a place where one can speak freely about faith. But I could not watch you suffer without offering the only hope I knew. The sincerity in her voice cut through the defenses I had built for decades. I did not feel threatened. I felt seen. I hesitated before speaking again, but the question pressed against my throat until I released it. "Do you believe Jesus can heal me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. With all my heart." Her certainty struck me with a force stronger than any medical diagnosis I had ever encountered. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Pray for me." The moment I said it, I felt something shift inside me, like a locked door had cracked open. Maria looked stunned at first, then deeply moved. She placed her hand lightly over mine, careful not to overstep culturally, and closed her eyes. "Lord Jesus," she whispered softly, "please touch Dr. Nasser. Heal him. Show him that you see him, you love him, and you have power over every sickness." Her words flowed with such gentle conviction that the room felt different, as if a stillness settled over us. As she prayed, something strange began happening in my body. The burning in my spine, which had tormented me day and night for months, eased slightly, just enough for me to notice. My breathing steadied. My hands, usually trembling, rested calmly against the blanket. I felt warmth spreading across my chest, not painful warmth, but comforting, like stepping from darkness into sunlight. When she finished praying, I opened my eyes slowly, afraid the moment might disappear. "What did you do?" I whispered. She shook her head. "Not me, sir. Him." I lay there in stunned silence, overwhelmed by a sensation I had not felt in months: relief. It was small, fragile, incomplete, but unmistakably real. That night, alone in the dim light of the hospital suite, I replayed everything. The dream, the voice, Maria's prayer, the warmth, the brief taste of peace. My mind wrestled with questions I could not ignore. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding, and whispered words that felt impossible yet necessary. "Jesus, if you are real, show me the truth." The moment the sentence left my lips, a quietness filled the room, not the sterile silence of a hospital, but a deep, settling calm that reached into the very places where fear had lived. I did not know what would happen next. I did not know where this path would lead. But for the first time since my illness began, I felt the faintest spark of hope, flickering quietly in the darkness. Maria visited me early the next morning, just as the hospital room filled with a soft glow from the rising sun. I felt different, still weak, still trembling at times, but something in my spirit had shifted. The heaviness that once pressed down on me like a mountain had lifted, if only slightly. She noticed it the moment she entered. "Sir, you look lighter," she said gently. I nodded because I felt it too. Yet a lingering question gnawed at me. Was yesterday's peace simply emotional comfort, or had something truly supernatural touched me? When I asked Maria what happened next, what I should do now that I had whispered that impossible prayer, she hesitated. She lowered her voice, glanced toward the door, and said, "Sir, there are believers who gather in secret here in Riyadh. They pray for healing. They pray for miracles. If you want, I can take you to meet them." Her words struck me like a hammer. Secret Christians in Riyadh? Underground gatherings? The very idea was dangerous, even unthinkable. But my desperation outweighed my fear. "Take me," I whispered. And with that single decision, my life turned onto a path I never imagined walking. That night, after my vital signs stabilized and the doctors completed their final checks, Maria quietly helped me dress. She explained that the visit had to be discreet. "Sir, no one must know. Not the hospital staff, not the palace office. Only us." My heart pounded as she helped me into a plain winter coat and handed me a cap to cover my hair. A hospital staff member loyal to her escorted us through a side exit normally used for supply deliveries. The cool night air struck my skin, and I inhaled deeply. The first time in months I felt the outside world without fear of collapsing. A small, unmarked sedan waited behind the building. The driver, a young Ethiopian man, nodded respectfully and opened the door. I hesitated for a moment, realizing the weight of what I was about to do. If anyone discovered I was visiting an underground Christian gathering, the consequences could be catastrophic. For me, for Maria, for everyone involved. But something stronger than fear nudged me forward. I stepped into the car, and the door closed behind me with a soft, final sound. The drive through Riyadh was surreal. The city lights blurred past my window, Alalea's glass towers, Talia Street's restaurants, the distant silhouette of the Kingdom Tower. These were places I had visited all my life, yet tonight they felt foreign. The roads were familiar, but the journey was not. My body trembled with anxiety, but my spirit leaned forward, drawn by something I could not name. Eventually, we left the central districts and entered a quieter outskirts area, rows of older buildings, sand gathering along the sidewalks, the glow of street lamps dimming as we moved farther away from the heart of the city. The car stopped in front of what appeared to be a deserted, partially renovated building. Its windows were dark, the walls plain, offering no hint of what lay inside. The driver gave a soft knock on a metal side door. After a moment, it opened just enough for a voice to ask, "Password." The driver whispered something in Amharic, and the door opened fully. Maria helped me out of the car, her hand steady on my arm. I stepped into a dim hallway that smelled faintly of dust and candle smoke. We walked past stacked paint buckets and construction tools before reaching a narrow staircase leading downward. The deeper we descended, the warmer the air became, as if we were leaving the city entirely. At the bottom of the stairs, we turned into a wide room illuminated by candles placed safely inside glass jars. What I saw next took my breath away. Around 30 people knelt or sat on the floor, men and women of different nationalities. Filipinos, Ethiopians, Indians, a few Pakistanis, and to my shock, 2 Saudis wearing simple clothing, their faces partly shadowed. A wooden cross made from 2 planks leaned against the far wall. There were no chairs, no microphones, no formal structure, only quiet worship rising from trembling voices. The moment I entered, the atmosphere washed over me like warm water. I felt peace. Not the fragile, temporary peace of distraction, but something deeper, heavier, holy. Several people looked up and immediately recognized my fragile condition, though none of them knew who I was beyond being someone in desperate need. A man in his 50s, possibly Ethiopian, approached with a calm, gentle expression. "Welcome, brother," he said in Arabic tinted with his accent. "We are honored you came." No one asked my name. No one demanded an explanation. They simply welcomed me, not as a royal doctor, not as a Muslim, not as a man of status, but as someone who needed healing. They invited me to sit on a cushion near the front. My legs trembled as I lowered myself, the burning sensation in my spine flaring briefly. Maria sat close, offering quiet assurance with her presence. The group began singing softly in Tagalog and English, their melodies filling the room with a sweetness I had never heard in mosques, hospitals, or palaces. Their worship felt alive, unrestricted, pure. I closed my eyes, letting the sound settle into my trembling body. For the first time since my illness began, I did not feel suffocated by fear. After the singing faded, the man who greeted me knelt in front of me. "We will pray for your healing," he said gently. "But more importantly, we pray you will know the one who heals." I said nothing. I could not. My throat tightened as tears stung my eyes. He placed his hands lightly on my shoulders, and several others extended their hands from where they sat. Their voices began softly, rising gradually as they prayed in multiple languages. Some prayed in English, "Lord Jesus, touch him." Others prayed in Amharic, "Heal your son." Maria whispered her prayer beside me, her voice breaking with emotion. As they prayed, something began happening inside my body. The burning in my spine, the gnawing fire that had tormented me for nearly a year, started to loosen, slowly, steadily, undeniably. It felt as though invisible hands were lifting a weight I had become convinced would never leave me. The warmth grew stronger, spreading from my spine to my chest, then down my legs. My breathing steadied. My hands, once trembling constantly, grew still. Tears spilled freely down my face as the relief intensified. I had not felt such peace since childhood. The man praying leaned back slightly and looked into my eyes. "Do you feel him?" he asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. The truth was undeniable. Something beyond medicine, beyond logic, beyond everything I had believed, it was touching me, healing me, loving me. He continued praying, and as he did, the final wave of pain that had controlled my life simply lifted, gone, as though it had never existed. I gasped out loud, my hand flying to my back. "It's gone," I whispered. "The pain, it's gone." Maria sobbed beside me, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. The man smiled with gentle joy. "Jesus has healed you," he said. "But he wants more than your healing. He wants your heart." His words pierced me, opening a floodgate of emotions I had buried for years. Fear, pride, exhaustion, longing, and a deep hunger for truth. My voice trembled as I whispered, "What must I do?" The room fell silent. Every face softened with compassion. He said, "Speak to him. Acknowledge him. Surrender." I lowered my head, tears dripping onto my hands. For a moment I could not breathe. Everything inside me trembled. Then, with a voice that barely carried across the room, I said, "Jesus, if you healed me, if you touched me, then I believe. I surrender. I am yours." The moment the words left my mouth, a wave of peace surged through me so strong, so overwhelming, that I broke into uncontrollable sobs. I wept from the deepest parts of my soul. Years of fear, pride, strength, and struggle poured out of me. Maria held my arm as I cried, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." The believers around me rejoiced quietly, thanking God for the miracle unfolding before their eyes. In that basement beneath the streets of Riyadh, surrounded by people I had never met, I became a new man. Not healed only in body, but healed in spirit. When I finally lifted my head, my face wet with tears, I felt light, free, whole. Something I had not felt in decades. When they helped me stand, I realized I could rise without trembling. My legs were strong. My back was steady. The burning was gone. Completely gone. Maria stared at me with stunned joy, whispering, "Sir, you're healed." I nodded, overwhelmed. I embraced the Ethiopian man, then several others, not caring any more about cultural boundaries or status. Nothing mattered except the truth that had transformed me. As we left the underground church and stepped into the quiet Riyadh night, the stars seemed brighter, the air clearer, the world entirely different. I looked at my hands, steady, strong, and whispered into the night sky, "Thank you, Jesus." In the months after my healing, I lived with a sense of awe that no words could capture. Every morning I woke up expecting the burning pain in my spine to return, yet every morning I found my body whole, steady, and strong, stronger than it had been in years. My daughters noticed the change immediately. They asked what new treatment I had undergone, which doctor had discovered the solution that specialists across the world had missed. I smiled quietly and said only that I was recovering, choosing my words carefully. How could I explain to them that what healed me was not medicine, not therapy, not ruqyah, but the gentle touch of someone they had never been allowed to hear about? My transformation was not only physical. Something inside me had awakened, a peace that replaced fear, a certainty that replaced despair, and a warmth in my chest that did not come from illness but from life. I began to walk around my home with a calmness I had never known, pausing often just to breathe without pain. Despite the joy, I understood the danger. I lived in Saudi Arabia, a land where Islam is woven into every corner of public life, and where embracing another faith is not merely frowned upon but seen as betrayal, social, cultural, legal. I knew that if anyone discovered what had happened in that underground room, it could cost me everything. So I lived quietly, guarding my secret like one protects a fragile flame in a storm. Maria continued working for me, but now she moved through the house not only as a nurse but as a sister in faith. She taught me how to read scripture discreetly, writing verses on tiny folded papers that I could hide inside medical textbook. At night, while the city slept, I sat alone in my study reading the words of Jesus, words that felt alive, sharp, and healing. The Quran had shaped me with discipline and reverence, but these words moved me with tenderness, hope, and love I could not explain. Every Friday evening, when my family assumed I was resting, Maria and I would quietly leave the house and travel to the underground church. Each visit filled me with wonder. I, a man who once stood with princes and dignitaries, now knelt on a concrete floor beside migrant workers, worshipping Jesus in whispered songs. There was no hierarchy, no status, only unity, only love, only gratitude. The Saudis who attended covered their faces, yet their tears revealed their joy. These gatherings became my lifeline, the anchor that held my heart steady as I learned how to follow Jesus in a place where his name could cost a man his life. As months turned into years, I changed in ways even I did not expect. I became gentler. My anger dissolved. My pride melted. I found myself listening more, speaking less, and valuing people, not for their titles or careers, but for the light in their souls. By the time I turned 70, I sensed a quiet stirring in my spirit, almost like a voice nudging me towards something beyond secret worship. One evening after a gathering, the Ethiopian elder placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Brother, Jesus has done much in you. But baptism is your public declaration before heaven, even if the world cannot see." His words settled deeply inside me. I had been following Jesus in secret, but I longed for something deeper, an act that marked my surrender not only in the heart but in the spirit. Yet I knew baptism in Saudi Arabia was impossible. It could endanger everyone involved. The elder suggested traveling to Cyprus, where many Middle Eastern believers went quietly to declare their faith. The idea frightened me, yet it also ignited something inside me, a longing to stand fully in the truth I had embraced. A few months later, under the cover of a routine medical conference invitation, I boarded a flight to Larnaca, Cyprus. The island air felt fresh and salty as I stepped out of the airport, walking with the same steady legs Jesus had healed. Maria had taken leave to accompany me, ensuring I had both care and companionship. On the day of my baptism, we drove to a quiet stretch of the Mediterranean coast, a place where the waves rolled gently against the shore and the sunrise painted the water gold. A small group of believers waited there, along with a pastor who greeted me with warm eyes. As I stepped into the cold water, my heart pounded with a mixture of reverence and disbelief. The pastor asked, "Dr. Nasser, do you believe that Jesus Christ is Lord and that he healed and saved you?" My voice trembled as I answered, "Yes. Yes, I do." With one steady motion, he lowered me beneath the water and lifted me again. The sea embraced me, the sky seemed to widen, and tears streamed down my face. I felt reborn, cleansed, anchored, renewed. Maria cried as she watched, whispering prayers of gratitude. After the baptism, on the suggestion of the pastor, I recorded a short testimony. I sat on a simple wooden chair on the beach, the wind brushing across my face. With the camera facing me, I spoke honestly about the illness that crushed me, the doctors who failed to find answers, the imams who prayed without effect, the dream that awakened me, the underground church that welcomed me, and the miracle that healed me. I spoke about how Jesus met me not in a place of strength, but in the moment of my deepest fear. I ended the recording saying, "If my story reaches even one person searching for hope, then my life has not been lived in vain." I intended for the video to be kept private until after my death. Little did I know what would come next. 2 months after returning to Riyadh, my testimony leaked. No one knew how. Perhaps someone in Cyprus shared it. Perhaps God himself planned it. All I knew was that one morning I woke to find my phone buzzing endlessly. Friends, old colleagues, distant acquaintances, all messaging with shock, confusion, or anger. The video had gone viral across the Middle East. Some called it fake. Others insisted it was AI-generated. A few recognized my voice and panicked, urging me to deny everything. Religious authorities condemned the video as fabricated misguidance. Yet beneath the noise, messages began pouring in from secret believers. Saudis, Yemenis, Kuwaitis, Egyptians, Syrians, thanking me for giving them courage. I was frightened, yes, but also deeply moved. My story, once locked inside the walls of a basement church, was now breathing across borders. As the weeks passed, my health began to decline again, not from illness, but from age. My body grew weaker, my movements slower, yet my spirit felt more alive than ever. Maria stayed by my side, caring for me with the same compassion she showed from the first day she entered my home. One quiet evening, sensing my time was near, she asked if I was afraid. I shook my head slowly and whispered, "No, because I know where I am going." She held my hand as tears filled her eyes. In the final days, I spent hours in silent prayer, thinking of the desert dream, the stream, the voice that called me. I knew who had spoken to me that night. I knew who had carried me through the pain. On my last morning, with sunlight filtering through the curtains, I gathered my remaining strength and whispered my final words to Maria. "Tell them, he healed me. Tell them, he saved me." And with that confession resting gently on my lips, I closed my eyes for the last time.